To say I'm excited about today would be an understatement. We're going to begin today getting these cases back together, and hopefully at the end of this few days off that I have it back in the bike. So just got done with a trip at work, so have quite a few days off now in a row. I can actually sit down here and put in some work in the garage with you guys, and pretty pumped about that. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do today is get these bearing retainers back in. You remember the last time we were working on it, we put the bearings and all the seals and everything in. However, I ended up having to get these bearing retainers out. I had to destroy them, or basically they're glued in there from Honda pretty good. So I had to heat them up quite a bit, and then with an impact driver, get them out. And the impact driver kind of messed them up a little bit, so I ended up ordering new bearing retainers from Honda. They're like $1.50. So once you're inside something like this, it's very hard to get access to it again. So might as well just replace it. So we got the bearing retainers on the main. This is your trans input, and also the gear shift drum retainers. So. Holding the bearing down, so it gets installed like that. We got these torqued down, and we're just going to make a mark on each one. Just give us a visual cue that they were torqued when we're putting this together. Prevents you, when you get mentally engaged in something else, not having to remember what you did, when you can just look at it and be like, oh yeah, okay, last check before I close these cases up, I torqued them. So in preparation for today, we have the document for installing the electric starter, and that I downloaded off of the internet. We have the service manual with everything of, all the instructions of how to do this. And with that said, it's not exactly, so this tells you how to do everything, but it doesn't flow very good. So I went through this manual and created this document here. And what this is it's basically it combines all the information inside of that service manual and puts it into one place as to how to put the engine back together. So you can see, when you go to putting a certain component in, like the balancer shaft, it'll tell you, to put the balancer shaft in, you have to do items, 8.3, 6.4, and 14.2. And then so I put everything in I went through the whole procedure, put everything in an organized list of how to start with bare cases and end up with the complete engine together and timed and everything. And that's through this basically general procedure. So we're going to start with the piston jet, then the left, we're starting on the left case guide plate, scavenge pump, and move through that. One of the things I noticed that we need to remove actually is it looks like to put the electric start in, we're no longer going to need this pin, or actually this piece of this steel plate right here, which works to with the kickstarter to prevent it from fully rotating. From the instructions for the electric start, it looks like this actually gets left in there and this gets removed. I'm not sure why this gets left in there. It could possibly be to provide some type of support for the aluminum casting. So you can see it got a little, from us putting it in the oven at 400 degrees, it got a little rusty in some of these areas, but I'm not gonna worry about that. Once this thing gets put back together, it's gonna be bathed in oil circulating around in there, and that will go away with time. So I lied, I actually got some brake cleaner on a Q-tip, and all that nasty rust that came from this piece of steel actually cleaned up pretty nice. Before we get started, while I got the cases apart, I just wanted to highlight a couple things in the engine, specifically to the 2017, and that would be the oil system. So it's different from the 08, as we have a filtered oil supply and an unfiltered oil supply system. So there's basically two stages. One stage, your dirty oil is what feeds the transmission, and then your clean oil is what feeds the crankshaft and the valves. So oil accumulates in the bottom of the transmission, and I'll show you that on the case here in a minute. So oil gets fed to the transmission components and falls to the bottom of the transmission. It gets picked up through a filtered screen, and then it goes through the actual oil, the filtered oil feed pump. Right here you have a pressure relief valve in case the filter gets clogged up or something happens into one of the internal passages. So it picks it up out of the transmission, dirty, goes through a screen, goes through the main oil pump, and then it gets fed up here to the filter. So after this point, it's clean, and you have oil getting fed to the bottom of the piston. So this piston jet is supplying basically cool, clean oil to the bottom of that piston, where it can cool it off so it doesn't overheat. And then you're also feeding oil onto the alternator, and I'm not sure what that's for. I don't think it's for cooling. I think it's just to get slung around inside of that left side case. And then, as I talked about before, you have the forced oil supply to the bottom rod, and that comes through that little hole inside of the crankshaft and past that oil seal that we installed in the last video, and it goes right into the bottom rod and lubricates that. And then off of that line to the piston jet, you also have the valve train supply. So you have a drilled passage that comes all the way up top and lubricates the cam lobes and all the lifters and rockers, everything up top in the motor. So oil from that system, it falls to the bottom of the crankcase, and it has a scavenge system, so it's essentially a dry sump. So oil falls down here to the bottom of the crankshaft, it windmills it into a passageway, and it gets picked up by the scavenge pump. Scavenge pump pressurizes it, comes through this line, it has another pressure relief valve for the dirty side, or the scavenge pump side. And then from there, it gets fed into the gear train. So inside of that clutch lifter, the lifter rod has a bunch of drilled holes in it. And from there, it pressurizes oil into the gear area, which is really smart. Because in the past, it used to just, basically the transmission sat in a bath of oil and it just flung oil around itself. However, in the 2017, it's a pressurized system that actually feeds oil to the gears and out here to the clutch area and the clutch bearing. So here is the right side case. This is where the transmission components are, and this is where the crankshaft is. This is your scavenge pump rotor hole. So you can see the transmission, the crankshaft actually rotates in this fashion, and it flings the oil here through that hole into the suction of the scavenge pump. So how it gets there, basically you have the pressurized oil supply, as I said, to the transmission, and then it falls through the bottom of the transmission onto this area, and it goes through these holes down here. So where those holes come to down here is met by your left case, and your left case has this area which shares this same area. And right here is your oil pickup for the main oil pump. So here is where your main oil pump picks up the oil. This is where the screen is. And then you have your main oil pump here. And then from there, it gets fed to the oil filter and the crankshaft, valve train, and the piston jet. The computer document I made up to kind of organize going through this is really helping out a lot. So far we're on the main transmission assembly, and part of that is verifying before we drop this into the case that all the washers, spring clips, and everything is assembled, because you can't have, if that transmission is out of alignment side to side, that's going to eat your case up or destroy the gears somehow. So the service manual provides a really good instruction and illustration here on where the snap rings are, the thrust collars, and considering I didn't take it apart, however, we did wash it, everything is in place, and as I talked about before, there's nothing really wrong with this transmission, so we're not going to be taking it apart. However, to start installing stuff in the motor, one of the things Honda calls out for is a molybdenum oil, and I'm going to show you how to make that. It's basically 50-50 mixture of some type of grease with Moly in it, and then oil. And the oil I'm going to use in this bike and all my bikes has always been Rotella. It works really good with clutches. It doesn't have all those friction modifiers in it, and it's cheap enough to do oil changes quite often, which is kind of a requirement for engines that have less than a liter of oil in their capacity. So we're gonna mix some molybdenum oil up now and get that ready to go. So there we go, we got some Moly oil. Getting some oil on this, and I'm gonna put some oil down on that seal in there so that the crank can slide through that. So the crank is actually going to be longer. It's too long for just to sit on the bench anymore. So this is something we have to do anyway. Weird. It actually hits the case. I'm hoping that whenever the other side goes on and we get the primary gear on, it lifts it off that, because it can't rotate right now. And it kind of makes sense, but I didn't really notice that coming apart. Now that we got this thing together, we need to be real careful that as we're rotating this around, that the connecting rod does not slam on this piston jet. This is one of those critical things that we can't break, because if it breaks and it's coming down in here, it's going to destroy the motor. So to get the shift drum, the shifting forks, and the pins all into where they need to be, we actually need to flip this case. So what we're going to do is temporarily install the right side case and flip it on the right side case down, and then we'll remove this left case and get access to the gear area. And we're just gonna, some of these surfaces that are, this will be the last time that this side's case gets put on it. So make sure we got everything where it needs to be. While putting the, while trying to, I forgot how I did this last time. While trying to put the crankshaft through the right case, it wasn't really going very easy. So took it apart, and we're just going to do some quick measurements on it. I do have a crankshaft puller. However, I'd like to actually freeze this if I could, and heat this a little bit to get them to go to bed, to get them to go together a little bit nicer. So we'll do some quick measurements on this and see if it's actually an interference fit or not. So it looks like 1.181. And 1.180 on the bore, so it is actually an interference fit. I'm gonna have to delay this a little bit, and we're gonna get this in the freezer, and we're gonna heat this up with the heat gun, give it a couple hours or something in there. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. That sucks. So a little bit of oversight on my part. I probably should have measured those better before and anticipated that. But it's not a big deal. We got the crank in the freezer. Maybe give it like an hour or something, take a break, and I might be able to work on some other stuff. And whenever time comes, we're gonna heat this up a little bit. Like I said, I do have a crankshaft puller that will actually extract that through that bearing, but I'm gonna take a look at a couple of YouTube videos, see how other guys did it, and I don't really want to pull the brand new crankshaft through that bearing if I don't have to. If I could freeze it and make it fit by heating it, that'd be better. So I'm gonna take a little break, watch some YouTube, and maybe I can work on some other stuff until then. Well, I just spent about 2 hours outside chipping ice off the driveway. We got a pretty big snowstorm the other day, and where I live sucks with the driveway. It just gets icy. So work some stress off, and I'm gonna go get a bite to eat, and then we're gonna check the fridge, see if that thing can fit in there, and then I'm gonna come up with a plan for how I can heat that up without destroying that brand new seal I already have pressed in back there. So get some food, clean up a little bit, and come back at this fresh. So this is the stock crankshaft that came with the bike from Honda, the OEM. So we're gonna get a measurement on this and see what this measures out at. So this one looks like 1.180. So that would explain it. So this one leaves us enough clearance in that bearing, and the one from Hot Rods that came supplied with the kit looks like it's an interference fit. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm gonna put some foil in the back side of this bearing to protect the shield. And if it does, so it's been in the fridge for about 2 hours, and if it doesn't go through, I am gonna yank it through with this crankshaft puller that I have from Tusk. So Hopefully it just drops in though when we just from it being cooled off. So got the puller out. However, the thread depth on the 17 is so far in there that when the bolt that came with the puller is used, I'm only able to grab onto the internal threads with like 2 threads maybe. So I had this, it's a fine thread, it's a 12 by I think 1.0 thread. So I'm able to use this one and get all the way in there. However, because this doesn't have threads on it, I can't use this collar, which is intended to be used with this collar to attach to there. So I'm just gonna put the bolt directly through here without the collar, and I got a couple lock washers stacked up so that when the bolt goes through here, that the hex heads don't chew this up. These will be able to distribute the load in there a little bit better with them like that, so that when this bolt goes through there and I put it in here, I'll have plenty of thread to grab the internal threads inside of there, and then I won't pull the bolt head through this adapter. So it's one thing after the other. So I got it mocked up with the old crankshaft, and how this is going to work is we're going to put this, so this surface right here is going to hit on there, and it's going to allow us to basically to pull the crankshaft through the bore of that bearing. See if this fits. It might. Nah, it's gonna have to get pulled through. Flip this like this so that we minimize the chance of pulling the rod through the case. It's coming. Gonna go real smooth. That may be it. Yikes. So I think we bottomed it out, and I think it's in there. I would have liked to have avoided doing that, but I don't think we were going to shrink that. That's the thing, I could have left it in there overnight, but didn't really want to do that. Whew. Oh my gosh, I thought I sunk it in here, and I wasn't gonna be able to like get it out. Man alive. So anyway, there's our crank, and that's pretty cool. Feels pretty good. No problem. And I didn't lose it in there, which is good. Got some condensation already forming on this, so I'm gonna give this a little shot with WD-40 to try to minimize that. Kind of an unfortunate byproduct of having to freeze this thing, even though it didn't work out well. Sucks. I don't really care how much of a mess I make right now. I just don't want this thing getting rust on it. That's bad. So finally, getting to join these case halves. This should go a lot better. And we'll clear that so it doesn't hit the... One thing we got to be careful now that the crank and rod are in there is when this thing can come around and it can smack on that piston jet. So this is the jet that squirts oil up on the piston, and what I'll do is take this little tube and just to protect that, shove that over it so that if this rod does come down and hit that, it bounces on it and it doesn't fracture the aluminum, which could potentially cause it to fall off in there, which would be very bad. So with the case flipped and down on the right side, we'll take the left off. Well, we're going to get to the joining these two case halves together. So we're about to join the case halves, and just second guessing myself, looking down and seeing those pink paint marks is good reassurance that, yep, I did tighten everything, and everything should be ready to go to join these two cases. Well, that went pretty smooth. Weird. For the torque paint on the bolts that are on the outside of the motor like this, what I do is put them, make a line that goes from the middle to the 12 o'clock. And that way, not only can you identify that they've been torqued, but you can also determine a relative position if they've loosened at all. We got the case halves together, and the next step is actually going to be breaking. It looks like, so we just finished here. The next one is going to be moved to the right case and configure the starter clutch and start getting some of the components on this side of the engine together. So it's be cool. It's the first time we're actually going to break into that electric starter box. putting an end to the first day of the engine rebuild here. We got into a good spot, and I figured it's about 6 p.m. so good time to quit. But doesn't look like much for pretty much putting in 8 hours on it today. But we got the crank installed and everything figured out with that. Tomorrow we're going to pick up on putting into the oil pump on the moving to the reed valve and the main oil pump system. But for now, time to go offload all the video I got in these cameras and refill my Q-tip holder.